This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world. John Bailey, the old Citizen Net Reporter, with you with the Dean of Journalism for the City of White Plains, Jim Benerofe. Evening, Jim. We thought it was going to be a real quiet week, but it wasn't. Tell us about the headlines.
And here are the headlines for the week ending August 23rd, 2019. School assessment results late again. Do they really help further educational effectiveness? A student's actual test answers they got wrong on the assessments are not available for teachers to zero in on their weak spots. Does the state education department need an assessment? An uptick in purchasing commercial property in White Plains is detected. What does it mean? How would you improve the state of journalism in Westchester County? Jazz Festival kicks off in September. Some very significant contributors to the growth of America died this week. A woman research pioneer, a computer genius, a former correspondent on the Huntley-Brinkley Report, the last of the sports commentators, and two athletes to remember.
Thank you, Jim. And let's go to the White Plains Week video newsreel March of Time. And of course, everybody got their school calendar for the new year this week in full color and with intriguing news. And that news is that school begins the day after Labor Day. Let's look at the next slide. Keep calm and welcome back to school. And just to make sure that you see the fact that it is definitely September 3rd, let's take a look at September, January, and there it is right on the calendar. This really shocked me because when I was going to school, way back in the 50s, you always went back to school the day, 2 days after Labor Day, the Wednesday. And so this is new, and it is being done because they moved conference days up prior to the start of the school day, and this really improves matters, James, because I always felt that the first week of school was like a throwaway week, you know, because you weren't really into the mode yet, and as soon as Thursday arrived, your first real full day of classes, then on Friday, hey, it's the weekend already, you weren't really concentrating anyway, so I think at least you're going to get 3 days of solid school on that. So this will be an interesting experiment. Now, the assessments came out overnight before we're doing this show. And what intrigues me is, you remember how it was last year. Next slide. We had a basically disaster last year in the assessments because they didn't come out until September 26th. Well, they improved a little this year. They put them out overnight, essentially, or late afternoon on Thursday. We are taping on Friday morning. And there it is. There is the press release about the results. And what do they say? Next slide, please. Statewide, are basically even. They are 45% passed ELA last year, and about 45.2% passed it this year. It's just stunning to me that there was no improvement on ELA. In math, however, thumbs up here. Statewide, they improved by approximately 2.2 percentage points in the math, with less persons taking the test. And now, what did White Plains do? I just checked these figures this morning before we taped the show, and White Plains scores were down in ELA by 2 points. Only 43% passed this year of all the students taking it, compared to 45% last year. But in math, they did better. 44% passed, and that is something to be talked about. At least they improved in
Well, it
math.
would seem to me, I think that the percentages
Yes.
of passing should be a lot higher than they are. I'm talking about they should probably be around 50, 60%.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that I don't. If you're not going to read what the new assessment says, okay, as what can you depend upon?
Yeah.
I mean, we talked with Dr. Ricca about actually using how he uses the assessments that come out from the state, and he said they come out so late that, you know, we can't really figure them into planning, and he said that we depend upon our own assessments, which we think are more accurate. The question is, why doesn't the state test reflect more of what we see in our local assessments? But that is just a White Plains problem. You know, apparently, this inability of the state to show teachers what students got wrong on the assessment tests on an individual basis, so teachers eventually this year can work on the questions they got wrong, is strange to me. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Isn't that how you always got helped when you were troubled with the subject? I know it was. It was for me. Just, you know, you'd go into the teacher after school, and you'd have and she'd go over what you went wrong or whatever, and they had remedial classes, the whole 9 yards. But the teacher knew you, she knew you were, or he knew your work. And I think this is a real flaw. They have to make more available and more of these results by student available. I don't know why they can't do that. And they were also really late this year again. And the results had to be in by the end of July 25 and to be counted. So this raises another question in my mind. How can it take so long to for the districts to send in the results?
Yeah. Well, to some extent, I think maybe they should be doing assessment tests somewhat more frequently.
Oh, they're going to love you.
Well, you know,
Right.
I don't. We've got to get this up to passage of 50, 60%. I'm sorry, and I don't even know
How you do that.
Yeah, I don't know how this compares to foreign countries.
Mm-hmm. It's not good.
And I have some familiarity with Japan because my son is basically running a school there. It's for younger kids, but their educational system is much more demanding on kids than ours is, and we've got to start to pay attention to that.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you. But how you improve them 15% in And how much time is it going to take to do that? I mean, we've been dealing with these assessment tests ever since the George W. Bush administration ushered in the No Child Left Behind situation.
Well, I think that they should make more demands on kids reading, for one thing, and they should smash their cell phones.
Well, that's a great distraction.
You know, and to some extent, take them away from the computer. They've got to sit and read books.
Well, that's true. And it is a social phenomena of these iPhones and Netflix. I mean, you can all you multitask now, but the only way to really learn is concentrate on one task at a time.
Yeah.
Because the only way you learn to do anything is by doing it over and over again, seeing what you did wrong, and determined to bust through. So, I mean, this is an issue that parents should be paying attention to, and not in a confrontational way with the school district, but in a cooperative way. It would be nice when the New York State teachers complained about the assessments being used for teacher evaluation, if they had not taken that tack. They should have taken the tack. We really don't like the way these things are approaching the subjects, and this is our concern. Now, they never really did that in specific detail at that time, and shame on the New York State Senate for not holding hearings on the assessment tests that Pearson was adjusting as to what was wrong with them, and bring in both sides to talk about it. They never held those public hearings. It was a fundamental dereliction by the New York State Senate of duty not to get to the bottom of the most important question facing New York State today for the future: education of our children. There, I said that. And now, brighter news for White Plains. This building, the Dillon, was one that was recently purchased by a developer from New Rochelle, along with another apartment building in the city. And it intrigued me whether this is a trend that White Plains is now looking very good to persons who are interested in investing in White Plains on the building side. Why does a developer do this? Because that's a relatively new apartment.
I would assume that the seller of the building is looking to raise capital. I don't know what the investment goals of the buyer are, but they think the market is good, that the rents will go up, and that they will be able to make more money based on whatever price they pay for it. But I think there's a couple of reasons that property gets sold. Sometimes, particularly when there's a family business, sales take place because maybe the family is getting older, and they don't want to be involved with the management anymore, and they want to sell off the properties and be in a more liquid situation. Although our tax system doesn't really allow
what
for
tax
that.
system?
So those are some of the things that happen, but I think that White Plains is it seems to be a growing market, and
Well, that really shocked me when the guy was telling me about it, because I said, why? It's a new building, brand new, basically.
yeah, I would say the developer is looking for cash.
I see.
They may want to develop more stuff. And
Right, I see. Okay, but that maybe this is boding well for White Plains for the future. More solid investors instead of developers who come in, say they're going to build something, and then run into problems. A lot of problems. Now, speaking of problems, we talked about the FiOS decision to drop RNN News from their programming. However, that has changed. Persons that subscribe to FiOS say that FiOS has assured them that they are going to have a news source, a news presence on FiOS, and it's going to be announced maybe in September, which is a complete switcheroo from what they said last week, that they're dropping news entirely. And I don't know this, but I would imagine everybody called up FiOS and said, get me out of FiOS. And this has alarmed them, so they're now maybe scrambling, or they may have negotiations going on. What I would do is I would try to combat, what is the other one? Altice, with affiliations with one of the New York flagship stations, local news, NBC,
Well,
CBS.
how is Altice doing?
What?
How is Altice doing?
Well, they are now offering a tremendous discount aimed right at FiOS subscribers, because we're the only news in town is the approach. News 12 exclusive, and News 12 is saying that they are #1 news in the county area, #1 source, which, well, right in a couple of months, they may be the only source. But be that as it may, I would think, but however, in the report this week, the heads of FiOS said, well, we're definitely not going to go back with RNN. So that is still a problem for RNN, 150 people out. But basically, more to the point, how would you improve the state of journalism, electronic or paper, in Westchester County?
Well, I think there's probably room for local weekly newspapers, like I used to run.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do it at my age, but you know,
A lot of things we don't do at our age.
yeah, I think that you know, the right people. There are some things. What are the two? You've got the Patch, and what else?
White Plains Examiner.
Yeah, but I mean, there's another. What's the name of the company that Carl Tucker has?
That escapes me.
Well, it escapes me too. That's part of an age problem.
No, it's not. It's because of the owners of those papers. They don't promote them.
Well,
You gotta promote.
Patch gets promoted pretty well, I would say.
Yes,
mean,
but they have nothing.
Oh,
They rarely have anything that is any substance.
well, how often do you look at Patch?
Not often, because
Yeah,
I've
but I look
dismissed
at
it.
I look at it on
So
an almost
what-
daily basis.
All right, so
Well,
what
they
stories
have a lot.
have
They have a
covered?
lot of things about housing.
Yeah.
They have when there's major things like there was a fire in a firehouse, I believe, someplace upstate. They had a story about that. There's a fair amount of stuff. I mean, first of all, I get emails from them. I'm a subscriber. I get emails from them every day, and you know, like 5 or 10. So,
But how
and
many
they
of those
also-
5 or 10 emails are relevant to
all of them.
You really think so?
You got to read
All
them.
right,
You're not
fine.
reading them, so you tell me you don't read it. So
Well,
how do you
I
know?
was very disappointed with it when it started, and I didn't think it had improved much. So
They're still
I
around.
stopped watching it.
So they must have something.
They have a very large AOL audience.
Yeah.
That is the secret of their success. And
Well, obviously they must be making some money.
well, we don't really know if anybody is making money. I mean, really don't know that. But so you would think that there's room for weeklies to come back.
Yeah, The only area of the newspaper business that I think they say is doing well are weeklies. I would assume that a lot of people pick up the Examiner.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, the Examiner publishes in various areas, and it's sort of like a little network in a way. They're mainly supported by real estate advertising, which is a mainstay of weeklies, and that's good because however, I find that the coverage is essentially somewhat superficial and late because it's a weekly. But that's my analysis, and they don't really delve into the stories behind the story because that's controversial. But be that as it, we can't fix it, but I will say that any local television news that FiOS replaces has to cover less accidents, less tragedies, and less feel-good stuff, because that really isn't news, it's fluff. But apparently people like that. So if you want to be a news operation, you got to weigh in and follow what the effects of events on people. Now, and at least that's my opinion. And one thing that News 12 is doing, they're doing investigative reports and helping people out who have a problem, which is an old standby to build ratings in the news business. Channel 5 did that when they went to the 10 o'clock news way back in the 60s. You know, I forget the reporter who did it, but he really sort of pioneered that. And then you had Mr. Diaz, who did it on Channel 2. And it was that is a prime honored way of doing it. Now, moving along, there were some significant contributors to the growth of America who died this week. First up is a picture of Jack Perkins, who was the old commentator on the Huntley-Brinkley Report, and you will remember him as host of Biography. Over in the upper right is the great sportscaster Jack Whitaker, who is a tremendous sports commentator, and he is best known for his golf coverage. And he was the last of the really authoritative sports commentators. And now, in the lower left, you have Al Jackson, an original New York Met pitcher who pitched for about 10, 12 years in the major leagues and never got to play in a World Series with the Mets in 1969. But he eventually did get into the World Series, but he was a tough little left-hander. He was probably the best pitcher the Mets had back in 1962, and he was a really class left-hander, a lot of stuff, pitched deep into ball games. No one does that today. And then we have Jerry Murray, lower right, who was the roller derby queen of the 1940s and 50s. Do you remember watching roller derby on WPIX? Yeah, no, when you were a teen, you watched roller derby. Some of the places you could see women on television and who were athletes. And other than tennis, now tennis athletes are athletes too, but roller derby was exciting, and those girls were rough. Jerry Murray, one of the top roller bladers, she was roller skaters. So, and she passed away, but of significant loss were the next two persons up based on their obituaries. There we are. Up top is Leanne Russell, who studied radiation's effects on embryos, and she died at age 95. It is significant. It was a significant discovery, and it led me to think that we should really be looking at the effects of cell phone radiation on the brain.
Yeah, well, they are. There are studies being done on that.
And what do they find?
So far, I don't think they've found anything super significant, but You know, I don't talk enough on the cell phone to worry about it, but
That's right. Nobody calls me either, you know. It's and now the lower person was Danny Cohen, who died at 81. He's a computer scientist who helped set the stage for a digital era. He was well known for for developing the flight simulator program, and then he was able to develop a situation where you could communicate on the internet. And he also met one of his wives because she solved the puzzle that he had put up on a regular network, and he had to find out who solved this puzzle. And so
they got married.
Yeah, that right. And so it is fascinating to me how these obituaries really teach you about living successful lives, not giving up. And I firmly advise trying to read obituaries of stories of people's lives. But now, finally, Jim, what's ahead?
What's ahead?
What's ahead? So the Jazz Festival is ahead.
Yeah,
That's right. And we do hope the you check out the Jazz Festival. Just do a search on Jazz Festival for White Plains, and you'll get. And also go to the library website. They promote the Jazz Festival.
Now our local election is coming up in November.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. Perhaps we should see somebody start to campaign.
Right.
That's how it has slipped away from us, because when you don't campaign in the summer, which is always an excuse that, well, nobody's around the summer, nobody pays attention, but you have to get yourself out there and known.
Well, it's going to be interesting because there definitely are going to be some changes in the Common Council.
Yes.
And we'll see if that has a positive or negative effect.
Well, you bring up an important point, because you're going to have 2 new persons on the Common Council, and we assume that Nadine Hunt Robinson will be elected because she's an incumbent, but the other 2 Democrats are probably going to be whisked in because the Republicans have yet to really begun to fight, as John Paul Jones used to say, but they're not as good as John Paul Jones. But I meant the party. The party has to start helping these candidates out. Andrew Custodio, Mr. Perrone, Brian Perrone, and Anne-Marie Encarnarco, to make some waves and raise some issues.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, you may be right. It hasn't happened yet. John Bailey, Jim Benerofe, good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.